right, welcome back to the Fishing for a Reason podcast. And this is going to be a very interesting and dynamic episode. So if you are checking us out on Spotify or on iTunes or wherever you like to listen to your podcast, again, I'm just going to link the YouTube video below because you're probably going to see some footage. And there are 4 people on the screen here today. So we've never done an interview with this many humans, first and foremost. And secondary, I'm actually going to toss the interview mic, the hosting mic, over to my mother. We're going to be talking about the John Muir Trail, which is an incredible experience that the 3 of us, John, Scott, and myself, just embarked on. And my mom so graciously offered to interview us about the experience. So, Mom, I'm going to let you take it away. And thank you so much for being a guest host on the podcast today.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. So to start off, I'm just going to jump right in to ask you all to tell a bit about who you are. And we can start with you, John.
Hi, good morning. My name's John Dupre. I'm longtime pals with Scott Propst and now Jamie. I'm from Mount Shasta, California. I am still in the Navy. I'm actually a professor here at Oregon State University down in Corvallis. And I'm married, have 2 kids, 2 hunting dogs, and today is the opening day of pheasant season. So I am dressed in pheasant hunting garb, ready to go.
Awesome. And you got a pheasant today?
We did. My puppy, she's 2, was her first day pheasant hunting, and she got a pheasant. So I'm pretty happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott?
I am longtime pals with John Dupre, and my wife is Jamie. I'm a retired Navy guy and doing fishing chartering now in Anacortes, Washington with Jamie. And we just fished this morning and caught some coho out there on the last day. So that was exciting. And we did the JMT. Yeah, we'll talk about the hiking experience a little bit, I bet, but that's where I'm at.
All right. And Jamie?
And my name is Jamie Propst. I'm married to Scott Propst, who's right below my screen here. And I am the host of this podcast. And if you want to know a little bit about who I am, you can go listen to episode 1 or episode 10 to get a little background on that. So I'll keep it short and sweet. I didn't know I wanted to be a backpacker, but here we are. And I think we can officially say we are backpackers. So yeah, that's who I am.
I think so. So I know you guys did what we call the JMT, which is the John Muir Trail. Could you describe it to us? What is
it is the best part of the Pacific Crest Trail. So the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail, was a Mexico to Canada in 6 months, or backwards, Canada to Mexico. But the best part of it is the John Muir Trail, which is from Yosemite southbound to the top of Mount Whitney.
And the best because it's the easiest?
It's the best because it has the best views. If you want the best views of mountains and passes and whatnot, that's it, in my opinion.
Great. So what kind of hiking or backpacking experience did you all have before the trip? And I think this would be a good one for each one of you to describe. So how about you, Scott? We'll start with you.
So I had a little bit of backpacking experience, not a lot of like through hiking or long hikes like that. We elk hunt a little bit every year in Colorado, and so we get some hiking in mountains when we do that. So I had a little bit of experience of that. And then me and Jamie had prepped for this hike a little bit by doing some hikes locally. Jamie did she can talk about hers, but we did a 2-nighter and a couple of 1-nighters to get our gear ready. But we had very little experience doing big hikes like this for me, all in all. Some overnight stuff here and there, but big adventure.
Gotcha. Jamie, do you want to tag on behind Scott there?
Sure. So backpacking was always one of those things other people did in my world. I have a couple friends that have done it, and it never really appealed to me until a year ago. I read a through hiking book about the PCT, which John just talked about. And I was like, that sounds really challenging, like type 2 fun. Get out there, see if you can actually do the thing that you set out to do was appealing to me. And also sleeping in a tent. I've really enjoyed that process, like car camping. So marrying the 2 together didn't seem like a bad idea, but I had as Scott just described, no experience. So we did a couple little weekend trips, and then I did one solo by myself for 2 nights, and then tagged on a group of girls. We all went. So it was like a 6-day total trip as my training hike to see if the gear was ready and everything for the John Muir Trail. but really I would just call myself a complete beginner going into this experience.
Okay, now John, I gotta say, it sounds like you're a little more experienced than these two.
No, we are not through campers at all in this household. We are car campers, also known as dramping, which is the combination of drinking and camping because beer is very heavy. So I probably had a 3 or 4 night, maybe elk hunt where I backpacked in and had to rehydrate your foods. But other than that, this was a totally different ball game for yours truly.
Okay. Oh, wow. So we've got 3 non-experienced hikers doing a John Muir Trail. So I know you said what it was. I was curious, how many miles is the John Muir Trail?
It depends on how you measure. And so we've had some fun calculating our distance because we walked on the front side. We started in Tuolumne Meadows. No, we started in Yosemite Valley, but we had to walk from the bus stop, which is an extra mile or 2. We did a detour hike, so that added some miles. And then I guess the JMT actually ends at the summit, right, Jamie, of Mount Whitney. So then you tack on another 11 point something to get to Whitney Portal. I think by my rough mapping, it was 247 miles, but that's probably not very scientific.
Technically, the JMT is 211 miles from post to post, as John stated, but there's more miles. And I think you're about right.
And Jamie won. She did more miles than us because you went off and scouted a campsite for 2.
But you ran up a mountain to go help a lady. So no.
So maybe.
So
yeah.
Scott's the slacker in this community.
Oh, wow.
I lost. I missed out on a few miles somewhere. I may have to go back.
So maybe I'm jumping ahead, but the dynamic of the 3 of you on this journey together, how long did it take you to hike the JMT?
22 days.
22 days. Is this the most you've ever been with them, John? Probably not Scott, but with Jamie.
Oh my gosh. They're like 2 lovebirds, newlyweds. They wouldn't let me sleep in their tent. And it was a whole different ballgame of proximity and extra weight I had to carry. It was a good time. It was fun. We had a good dynamic, I thought. We had a lot of people like hiking by themselves because you're in this epitome of solitude. So I would take off and hike by myself a little bit. And then you'd come to some incredible vista like every half an hour or lake or something. And you're like, you need to share that with somebody. And so we'd all catch up and then we'd jump into some adventure. There'd be a fish to catch, lunch to eat, or feet to repair in my case, and then go walking some more.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. So when did you guys do this? The JMT. When was this, Scott?
So timing for the trip was interesting. We started on August 25th, actual hiking, but we were down there the 23rd, setting up resupply and getting everything ready to step off, getting the car parked so that we knew where we were going to get it back. August 25 to 22 days later, whatever that would be.
September 15th.
That's right, the 15th.
So
I think the timing was perfect because weather-wise, we just missed a snowstorm on the front side and we just missed a snowstorm on the back side. And as far as temperature, precipitation on the trip, and mosquitoes, I don't think we could have picked a better time to pull this thing off. Jamie, what do you think?
I 100% agree. So yeah, we ended up going, it was beautiful. I think we saw clouds in the skies only a few days. It rained for 2 seconds one day. It was perfect conditions. Needless to say, I don't think every trip is like that. I think we got lucky. So I would definitely be prepared. Like we all had a rain jacket, but we never used it as an example.
Wow.
So yeah, it was perfect timing. Not dealing with mosquitoes was a big plus, I think, about the time that we went.
100%.
And the temperature was warm enough for all of you?
It was like 70 something in the daytime and high 30s, low 40s at night. Probably.
Nice.
I would say, like Scott mentioned, it snowed the day before we started. And that was like, for me, uber worrying of, did I pack the right stuff? Do I have enough gear? And am I going to be cold? I didn't bring a sleeping bag. So I had a quilt, had 2 blankets. And I was, spinning in my mind of, this is dumb. I don't have a sleeping bag. It just snowed. This is going to be miserable. And luckily, it was beautiful. And we got off Whitney, and the next day it snowed. We got
Oh,
super lucky.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To John's point, like weighing what do I carry? Because it's more weight to have more options for scenarios. So what do I carry versus what are the bare bones essentials to lighten my pack? Because if you're too heavy, it'll destroy your feet and your joints, especially if you're new.
I saved, I think, 4 pounds by not carrying a sleeping bag.
I was just going to ask that. So what you carried was that much lighter than a sleeping
Yeah.
bag. I'm
My-
surprised.
I weighed everything on the kitchen scale here at the house, and
Okay.
my sleeping bag was like 6.5 pounds. So I had like a -20 bag. It's for cold weather, and I didn't feel like buying a new bag. And then I had these two like thin blankets, really, that you would wear to a football game in the fall, maybe, or in the bleachers or lounging in front of the TV. And I had two of those together weighed just over 2 pounds. So I was like, I have a 4-pound weight savings by not bringing this big bag. I'm in there. This is the calculus of what do you want to carry on your back for 3 weeks, and you better use every item,
Oh,
or it's
yeah.
not carrying.
Jamie and Scott, you had sleeping bags. You did not.
You want to go
Jamie
first, Scott?
did. Jamie did.
I was the only sleeping bag holder.
And how much did your sleeping bag weigh?
I'm going to Google it and let you know.
Oh,
So I had a blanket as well, and I only took one blanket, and it was actually, I told Jamie every night, yeah, I'm still on the fence on this blanket. I'm not sure. I think every night I said that, and I'm still on the fence. I think I didn't save the 4 pounds that John did, but I probably saved, it was in ounces of savings for me, which looking back, I probably would have just taken my sleeping bag, which was a plus 30, I think, which would have been fine. But the blanket worked out fine. I'm still on the fence on it.
that brings me back to John. I should have asked you this. In hindsight, would you have gotten a lighter sleeping bag for the trip?
If money was no object, I would have bought a down quilt.
Mhm.
I like quilts better than mummy
Oh.
bag. I don't like being like wrapped up in the torpedo or burrito of a mummy bag. But those were like over $400, and I'd already spent some money on my backpack and some other lightweight things. So then it was a cost savings thing. And yeah, so I checked the weather, and I played a little bit of, I was hoping it was going to be nice, that you don't need a -20 bag on the
Right.
JMT. A 30 bag would probably be great.
Yeah.
Unzip
Okay.
it and use it as a blanket if you wanted. Some nights I didn't use both of them quilts. I used one as a pillow. And then the nights that it got really cold, I unfurl it. And I was fine. Now, I slept with all my clothes on and a puffy jacket and a wool stocking cap. So the offset to not having a whole lot of bedding, I was fully clothed at night.
That makes sense. Jamie, did you find your answer?
I did. It weighs 1 pound and 13 ounces and is rated to a 30. It's a 30-degree bag. I think a 30-degree bag for this trip, as John just stated, was plenty. If I was going to go somewhere, I don't know, if it snowed. I wasn't fully clothed though. I just wore like my sleeping clothes. I never had to put on my down jacket inside my bag, and I was plenty warm enough. And it was light enough and compacted really well. It's the Nemo women's bag, and I'll make sure to link in the show notes for someone who wants to check that out, because it worked great for me. But again, we all have different preferences. And that's what's also really cool, is seeing all the different gear people use to get to their comfort level of whatever that is for whatever thing we're working on. So gear's a fun thing to talk about with backpacking.
There you go. And that brings this next question, is probably good, is what piece of gear was your personal favorite? And I'll ask all three of you who wants to go first.
Jamie.
My fishing rod. I brought my fly rod on this trip.
Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah, there's so many things about my gear that I loved, but the fishing rod just took the trip to another level for me. To be able to catch some of those trout in the alpine lakes was incredible. Like the golden trout, just the beauty of the fish. And I suck at fly fishing, for the record. I know this is a fishing podcast, so anybody know any good fly fishermen that we need to have on the show, I'm here for it, because I catch a lot of trees and a lot of grass. And didn't catch a lot of fish until this trip, but one gentleman on the trail told me that they're dumb fish and they tend to strike more than average when they're those alpine lake fish because they're hungry. They don't get a lot of opportunity to feed. So if you are a newbie fly fisherman, it makes it a lot of fun to go out there and cast a line on these incredible lakes that even just the view that you see and the mirror of the mountain reflecting off the water while you're casting a line, it was epic. So I would 100% say my fly fishing rod, although the case I carried was too heavy. And I did see a gentleman. So it's cool because you meet so many people on the trail. And I did see a gentleman who used, what was it? It was a casing for a light.
Fluorescent bulb tube.
Yeah. And he used that as his fly rod container. So it protected his gear, but it was a lot more lightweight to pack. That was inspiring. I would definitely switch to that, but I'd bring the exact same rod. And I'll toss it to Scott. How about you? What was your favorite piece of gear?
Ooh, favorite piece of gear. Let's see. Was not my headlamp. Was not my blanket. I had a guitar pick. Probably the solar panel. Probably my solar panel was like one piece of gear because
give context why.
I think it was just nice to be able to charge your phone. I could not worry about that piece of I didn't carry a big heavy battery. Jamie had a battery. So I think having that and just having the ability to charge your phone and know that you're not going to have to worry about losing your map or being lost.
Oh, I didn't think about the map. So I'm trying to picture where a solar panel would be on the pack.
I was able to, you could actually, a couple of times I carried it and I actually had my phone plugged in depending on which way the sun was, you're walking with the sun. So I was able to actually hike and charge a few times, but mainly it just folded up and went into a back pocket on the back of the pack and it was easy to get to and whip that thing out when we stopped.
Unfolded, how big is it?
It's probably 12 by 18.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
It's three panels and it's pretty big, 28 watts. And it charges on a 20-minute break, it would charge about 20% of my phone.
Awesome. How about you, John?
Scott took my answer,
no.
But I'll expand. I went 100% rechargeable on this. So I had the same solar panel as Scott and 20% in 20 minutes. It was fantastic. My headlamp was rechargeable. My phone was rechargeable. I had a battery that was rechargeable. And then I guess my piece of gear that was my favorite now was my SteriPen. I could illuminate water with UV light for 90 seconds. And I could have fresh water in a minute and a half for a liter with this little lamp. And it was rechargeable.
Oh, wow.
So that was neat. You have to drink water that's not muddy, but most of the, not 100% of the water we ran into was fast moving stream. And so I thought it was fast to make water, drink water, and move on.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So is that a typical tool that people use to purify their water?
I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I had backup because this was the first time I used it. I had tablets that would purify water in an emergency, but that was a 4-hour process. Like you had to put the pills in and like they dissolve and nukes your water in 4 hours. Some people use filters. Scott and Jamie used a filter that was powered by gravity. Previous to this trip, I had an MSR water filtration system that was by pump. So you physically had to pump the water through this filter. And gosh, it took 200 pumps, I think, to get a liter of water out. It was an effort. Yeah. And I didn't like that. I inherited this from my pop and it was neat, but modern technology, I didn't get sick, knock on wood. I don't know if the water on the trails even needs to be filtered, frankly, because it's so pure, but it was quick, it was easy, it was rechargeable, small, lightweight. Yeah,
that makes sense.
And we ran into how many people that said that they were not filtering water at all. They were just drinking everything.
Oh,
and
wow.
I think if this is this trail is probably one trail that you could, I think, do that and be okay with the amount of moving water and how fresh it is.
But don't count on that. Giardia is still a risk. So just for the sake of the podcast, we are not recommending that you go out and drink unfiltered water.
Yeah, it's cheap insurance, right?
I like the insurance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But we did use a life straw. That was our water filter. And so you could fill it up, I think 2 liters at a time, maybe three. Did it fit? 3 liters. We'd hang it and then we'd filter. And like John said, it was slow. John's was very fast, like 90 seconds, and he's got a full liter to go hike. So we generally would filter water either at night, in the morning, or during some sort of lunch break because it took a decent amount of time. We did never have a concern that we weren't going to have water, really. This whole trail, there was a lot of options, even though it was late in the season. So that's one benefit of hiking Northern California is you're not going to have the concern that you can find water, which is another reason the JMT felt like a really good one for us to do an extended trip on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think our longest no water section was like 6 miles, right?
It was like right after Half Dome or
Reds.
after
Red
Reds. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a couple of moments of no water, but
Yeah, it's just, I think water's heavy and you don't want to carry water that you don't need. And if you're going to cross a creek or there's a lake or something on your way, you could figure out pretty easily with a map, I'm going to drink a liter of water and carry no water because I know there's going to be water around the corner.
That's good to know. The water issue would be one, but I keep thinking about what did you eat? And so what was I know
Jamie?
that
Jamie's sponsored by Starkist Tuna.
yeah.
Frequent flyer mileage on Starkist.
Can't believe we don't have a tuna pack.
I'm sure we can cut to a picture of our
Ecuador's finest tuna.
So I'm not imagining that you all cooked over the fire at the end of the day. I'm assuming you all had your own food then, right?
The days that Jamie would catch trout, they would cook that with their spice rack of goodies. That was pretty fancy.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they shared.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, if there was no trout to have, what was the go-to meal? How did you guys plan your meals?
Who wants to go first?
This was such a big topic.
Yeah,
you could do a whole
it?
podcast on this.
Do we have time? Should I move on?
Jamie?
Well,
or John?
freeze dried is probably the main meal thing, right? Like your dinner at night was probably going to be some sort of freeze dried meal that either you made yourself if you had a freeze dried machine. Like we met a gal that I think her mother-in-law had one, like some sort of $3,000, and so she would go down to Carl's Jr. and freeze dry a double burger and fries or something.
It's really hard to picture.
Yeah, I went to the sporting goods store and we got Mountain House and Peak. There's a couple different varieties, but it's expensive. You're going to pay $13 or something for one of these things. And there's a lot of packaging that you might consolidate to save weight and put it in a Ziploc bag. But they're 2 servings per bag of this stuff. You add boiling water, let it soak for 5 minutes. I'd eat the whole thing. For me, that was 1 serving. But that was probably the bulk of your calories. The rest of your food's going to be some sort of like bars, probably protein bars or Cliff bars. I can't stand Cliff bars now. Had so many of them. But that's your typical lunch. Breakfast, you'd have some sort. I did cereal. I had like almond something cereal, and I packed powdered milk, a little water. I had cereal in the morning or oatmeal, and then I had some goodies like I had elk jerky. I made a whole bunch of that. That was my sort of protein. Gatorade packets, and then some like candy. Like for me, what are the Sour Patch Kids?
Sour Patch.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we could go on and on probably on like nutrition, but like having protein and fat and some carbohydrates and a nice balance with sugar for the marathon runners would use like those little C blocks. We use those. I use those quite a bit for, hey, this is a big hill. I'm starting to get a little gassed. Boom, right up on step for instant energy.
That makes sense. How about you, Scott?
So me and Jamie, we went through the food planning several times on what we wanted. And I think my kind of morning routine was I was an oatmeal guy. So I either started off with an oatmeal or a Gatorade G20 power bars, 380 calories per bar. So those were pretty nice to start the day off with. Lunches, I had planned tortillas and almond butter for most of them. So I shipped those in buckets to my resupply. And I also had ramen noodles that I was going to do for lunch. Snacks, we have this chocolate chunk trail mix that has chocolate in it. And chocolate has a lot of calories, so that's why it's a great treat for. I had these little M&M fun size packs that some hikers left at one of the spots, and they have 160 calories in one little small pack of M&Ms. And it was a nice treat to crack those open at the end of the day when you haven't eaten anything. And then for dinners, I did freeze-dried meals, like John said. And then one of my favorites, though, was ramen noodles and Spam pack. So a Spam slice and with ramen noodles turned out to be a pretty good meal for me. And it was interesting. I think the fueling thing I learned, I caught on pretty quick when I was feeling like getting tired and not having energy. I was like, oh, I didn't eat anything really for lunch. And so once I realized we planned 2,000 calories per day, but I think for me, I think I needed more than that. Making sure getting the calories was pretty important. And then I like the mountain house meals. I like having a pasta meal. Those were typically about 600 to 700 calories at night. So that was a big chunk of the calories for the day. And then just keep stacking it on throughout the day with I had what did I have? I had dried apricots for snacks. I had the chocolate chunk. I had the sea blocks, like John said. And then I found these honey stinger orange energy chews that I liked. So you could pop about 4 of those, and those were it would be a 150 calorie little treat going up a mountain and stuff.
That makes sense. Eat as you go.
Yeah.
How about you, Jamie?
Food was such a fascinating thing because you look forward to it the whole
When do
day.
you
So
not?
yeah, it's like it was such a fascinating learning curve too. I would highly recommend, if anyone's considering doing a long through hike, test your food situation. In our case, we had to have bear cans. So it wasn't like we could just bring whatever we could carry. We had to restrict it into a small space. So for me, I don't need as many calories as these guys. I probably still underprepared calories overall, but I also had a smaller bear can because I had a smaller pack. And the logistics of all that meant my routine, and I'll just go through literally what it was every day. It was coffee in the morning with hot cocoa, half a hot cocoa mix, because it was just delightful. And then I did protein powder, because protein was the big thing that I was trying to hit some numbers. So I did protein powder for breakfast. And then I would do a Cliff Bar, 2 packets of tuna or chicken, the tuna chicken packet thingies, for snack during the day. Lunch was also lunch, was the packets of tuna. And then dinner was one of those packaged meals, but I did 1 serving of it with another packet of tuna. So more protein with another coffee at the end of the day and hot cocoa mix. So that was my routine. But again, you're hearing like a lot of powders. It's because I had a restricted bear can. So in hindsight, I probably would have upped my amount of Cliff Bars for sure. And we all probably needed more calories than we were consuming, though. We lost a lot of weight. But I never felt out of energy, actually. Like I could tell I needed to eat, but I never felt like I can't do this because I don't have enough fuel. So, and I would say that's because I actually practiced with that concoction of meals prior to this trip on that 6-day longer trip. And I knew it worked for me. So test your stuff and then tweak until you find something that you can actually taste for 20 days and then carry based on the restrictions of your hike. Resupply was a thing for us. So carrying a lot of food was heavy.
And how many times did you resupply?
Twice.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
So
I'll reiterate, like Jamie's way smarter than us. She tested her food out. I never believed in the science of like nutrition until this trip, until 17, when I decided, oh, I'll eat Uncle Ben's free instant rice for dinner, which was all simple carbs. So day 17, I totally bonked. I like ran out of gas going up this hill, and then Jamie passed me like a jackrabbit on caffeine blocks. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. But in hindsight, as we thought about, like, what'd you have for dinner last night? I had crap for dinner. And having the right amount of protein and fats and carbs to power the machine that you're walking in, that was uber important.
good advice, firsthand advice. So this takes us to your hiking preferences. So what were your hiking preferences as an individual and then as a group? So it's a 2-parter. So let's just start with, I don't know, Jamie, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, preferences as an individual and as a group. Hiking preferences. I'm just going to riff on wherever comes to my mind first, but I'm thinking like John talked about a little bit earlier how he hikes a lot faster than like my legs just don't move very fast. And so he would hike alone. And I really liked that we all spread out during the day and had some time to experience it, but that we would slinky back together in those really cool vista moments. So it's
Okay.
interesting. You meet so many solo hikers on the trail, and it's like, what would that experience be like by yourself? And since I had done one small solo hike, it is such a unique experience to only have you to count on. But I would say for a through hike like this, the joy of experiencing it with these two was there's nothing I could ever match that to. It was epic. And I'm so thankful that we did it together versus alone. So I don't know. Group trip would be a preference. Sleeping by water was always fun because I could fish. That was a preference. I think that's it that I can think of right now. What do
Okay,
you guys
Scott.
think?
Scott, on to
Let's see.
you.
Individual preference. As
Individual.
in, it's a tough one for me. I love being together. I did same kind of thing, like back together at each summit and then having a minute. I like sleeping in. And that's the thing. A lot of people get up and are gone an hour before sunrise every day, getting the miles in. And you know what? I thought about that before we actually started hiking, but I think the way we did it, I like just having a slow morning sleep in because I think we all slept pretty good. Well, on and off, but I think our battle rhythm was pretty good though. Get up, have breakfast, get going. Only 2 days, I think we got up before sunrise and got going. But so, yeah, I think my preference would be to continue to sleep in and get your sleep because a lot of times I didn't sleep early in the night. My sleep happened probably from 4 to 8.
Once I got out of the tent.
So, and then, yeah, and then I think the group thing as well, just the way we did our own thing and then got back together at the passes.
You brought up something I never even thought of is asking this question. Timing of getting up would be a big one. So, John, you're with these two people. Did you have to wait? Are they going to ever get up?
No, I appreciate goats or Scots. I'm not a morning person. I thought Jamie would say, I don't like hiking at night. Like hiking in the dark. Some people are okay with that. Some people are like, it's a little weird. And so to get your miles in when the sun's out means, hey, when the sun comes up at 6:30, you're naturally going to wake up. And then you want to get to camp and probably not eat in the dark. So like you get to camp at 6 or 7 and you've got an hour or so to make dinner and set up your tent. So I didn't mind. We would probably step off at 8:30, 8:40
Yeah.
until noon. And the neat thing I thought was I'm becoming an introvert. And so I liked the whole go by myself a little bit. But then you get to something cool and you're like, you got to share that with somebody. And like, this is so neat. If you were a through hiker by yourself, you'd be taking pictures and then I got to move on. My preference for hiking though is uphill. I would rather go uphill 9 out of 10 times. The downhill for me, although it sounds easier, is just murder on my feet. So I was dealing with blisters and foot problems. I would rather go uphill 100%.
Okay, gotcha. That's interesting. You're stuck doing both no matter what on that trail.
46,000 feet of vertical. Every day was like up to and down to.
Which goes right into the next question of explain the differences between what the reality of the trip was and what your expectations were. Did you expect, and we'll stay with you, John, did you expect it to be that kind of an up and down thing?
Yeah, my expectation was that I would have all of this free time to think about whatever, and I would be just solving life's mysteries left and right. And it turns out Scott would come up behind me. He's like, "Hey, John, what are you thinking about this morning?" And I was like, "Man, I'm actually thinking about nothing. For the first time in probably a long time, I was like a complete blank. You're like, put one foot in front of the other because you don't want to trip. You don't want to get airlifted out of here because you sprained your ankle. And you trip a lot because it's rocky and gnarly. And then you're thinking like, what am I going to eat for dinner tonight? And my left foot hurts now and my right foot hurts more, and just get over it, grind it out." But for the most part, I was like, I'm not thinking about anything. And I thought I would be just like developing a cure for cancer or something. And this didn't happen.
Gotcha. Interesting answer, though. How about you, James?
My expectations of the trip, was that I was going to find something out there. Like I was going to find some sort of purpose or connect with something I couldn't have expected on an emotional level or whatever. I'm a deep thinker. So I expected that kind of power to happen in nature. And it was surprising. I didn't think a lot either. That's not true. I thought a lot. Yeah. It was your job. Your job was to wake up and make your miles, go to sleep, repeat. And I didn't quite expect it to feel as repetitive as it was. This is really a difficult question for me because it wasn't repetitive. The views were incredible. We saw 8 passes. We saw tons of wildlife. It was an amazing experience. It was better than I could have ever hoped it would be, but it was not what I expected at all. And I would 1,000% do it again. I would 1,000% do more miles. For me, it was a little life-changing because I know that this is something that I need to do more of in my life, but it wasn't what I expected. I hope that answered the question.
I think it does. Scott, I'm curious now. Your
So
input here.
let me see if I can you give me sharing for a second? So here's what I looked at a lot of to see my expectations. So this is the profile of the trip. And I knew it was going to be challenging physically, and I think it was. I think it met those expectations. But I think after the first week, I think we all got into our battle rhythm. And the same thing, I think there was something about, I don't know what I expected each pass to look like, but I think they were way better than what I thought. Most of them, I think. And I thought, honestly, I wasn't sure about the wildlife. I thought maybe we would see more wildlife. We saw a lot of deer. We did not see bears, but there was a lot of talk about bears. And I thought maybe we would see more wildlife on the trip as well. We saw some marmots. People talked about marmots a lot. From the physical point, I think it met my expectations. And then from some of the views, it exceeded my expectations of what it actually felt like. And then I think the feeling of being on top of Mount Whitney at the end, I think that feeling far exceeded what I thought it would feel like once we actually got done. So it was pretty amazing to be sitting up there at the top.
Very cool.
Yeah. I think.
Okay, Scott. And here I am at what were some of the highlights of your trip? I think you just said them for you.
I think that last climb up Mount Whitney and then being up there at the top at the finish line, and then just the feeling of,
nice. Being an accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's huge. How about you, John? What was your highlight? Or did you have one that you could say?
So Scott and I were in the Navy together, and we laughed and talked at the sort of the end about how this was very similar to a deployment on the aircraft carrier for 6 months. And you're leaving to go home tomorrow. And here we are at Guitar Lake. We're going to climb up this peak, and then it's going to be over. And there's all of the same feelings of get home-itis, get it over with, you want to go. And then you're reminded the plan that you came up with is probably a solid plan. Let's not do anything dumb. And then you're there at the top of Whitney, and you're like, it's an emotional moment. I thought it would be, and it was. And I thought that was neat. My favorite sections were the passes, probably, some better than others. And then the lakes, probably Thousand Island Lake to Garnet. It was just epic. Every half an hour, it seemed like we were in a different lake that I could have camped at every one of them. The last thing I'd say is, for me, it was like there was a mental aspect of putting up with some of the monotony of you're going to get up and you smell terrible and do it again. Jamie said, you're going to fight through some pain, aches and pains, and get over it, right? Grind it out. It's the most basic of human activity is walking, and you're just going to go walking today. And certainly slow and steady wins the race. There was no race, but like just put one foot in front of the other, don't trip. And next thing you'll be on top of this pass, and it's not that hard. So
interesting. I like that. One foot in front of the other.
Now, I still can't feel my toes on my left foot here, but you know.
Oh,
That's not probably
uh,
good. How about you, James? What's your highlight?
There were so many. I think the first one that immediately popped into my mind was, and it's funny, John, when you were saying how you thought my preference would be not hiking at night. I think this moment changed that because we hiked at night one time and I hated it early in the trip. And then at the end of the trip, we planned to get up in the dark and go to what time did we get up? 4?
or
Yeah. So we had to hike up this mountain in the dark so we could finish the whole day, the day of the trip. And when the sun was coming up as we were hiking and I could finally turn off my headlamp, the sky was just painted. It was incredible to see the colors of that sky. And that was the most emotional moment for me on the trail, was like that painted sky and knowing we were going to the summit. We were completing the task that we set out to do. And I got super emotional. I'm glad I was solo in those moments, but it was, yeah, it was really amazing to feel, wow, we did this. And then the other one for me was Glen Pass, which was not others' favorite pass, but for some reason I got a second gear and I was not fast up the hills except for that one. And that one I just
blocks.
went. And it was, I felt unstoppable up that pass. And that was a good feeling for some reason for me. And then catching fishing in the lakes. There was one, it wasn't a lake actually, it was a little river we were sitting next to at night where we camped, and the fish were just feeding like crazy. And the view was amazing. You could see the reflection of the mountain in the river. It was still, it was stunning. You could see the moon and the fish. Like I could watch them. I could watch their behavior and the way they were moving in the water, and just like for a extended period of time sitting there and watching nature do its thing was a humbling moment for me. And the only other time was pikas. I got up early and watched the pikas, and those little things are hilarious. They like bark at each other. So watching nature, and then some of the big climbs were my highlights, I would say.
It's one of my favorite pictures.
That was the place.
That was it.
That's stunning. It is beautiful.
There's Jamie.
Where?
Fishing.
All right. So now I gotta just ask another question, Jamie. The night hiking, is it because it was morning hike in the dark and you knew the light was coming? Or is it, so I guess what I wanted to ask is, do you hate night hiking at the very end of the day, knowing that it's going to stay dark, versus the last morning that you got up so early?
That's such a good question. The reason that I disliked the night hike, because it was still beautiful, we saw the sunset, versus liked the morning hike, was because it was in the plan. That's it. It had nothing to do with the actual night part. It was that I knew it was coming and I was mentally prepared for it. And that was the difference.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so let's see. I don't think we've really talked about some of the challenges that each one of you had and how did you overcome them. John, you did talk about your feet. So I'm going to start with you.
That was the worst part of the trip for me, was my feet. And I probably knew better with my shoes and my practice hikes. So I had got blisters before. I thought I had fixed the problem, but then I realized that I had never identified what the cause was. And so almost immediately it was like I was triaging some sort of like heel blister. Had Jamie not brought Leuco tape, which was like this magical sports tape, whatever, that mimics skin, I was popping a blister with a safety pin, squeezing out the goo and then taping it. And then lunchtime at a creek was putting my feet in ice cold water. It felt so good. But that just was like every day I'd spend 30 minutes in the morning triaging my feet. And by the time I finished, I had 15 blisters I counted. It was just bad. And so that was a downer, where your mind over matter, right? Hey, we still got to walk. And what's the saying, Scott? I don't mind, so this doesn't matter. Something like that. It was just, that for me was a hurdle. And I probably would have had a way better time throughout if my feet weren't so bad. And Not to say like my Brooks Trail Hikers was a bad shoe, because Scott had almost the same shoe. I think the this year's model, and nary a problem. So Jamie too, nary a problem. But for me, it was like I'd walk downhill, which I didn't like in the first place. I would get this blister on my heel. I would alter my gait to walk on the balls of my feet, and then my toes would get blisters, and then my toes would fall asleep.
Oh.
And then I'd walk on my heels again. It was just like a never-ending process. By the time you get to 22 days of that, you're like, not only do I crave a hamburger and a beer at the bottom, that I want to get off my feet.
You want to put your feet up.
Yeah.
Makes sense. How about you, Scott?
Oh, I think my biggest issue I had right off the bat was just my pack was not fitting right. I had it maladjusted. My waist strap kept loosening up. There was a little piece of Velcro that held the waist strap in place. Unbeknownst to me, it was loosening up and pulling out. And then my pack would fall down my hips. And I had rub marks on my hips after we finished that basically had almost rubbed raw from where my pack was riding on my hips too low. And I think once I figured out, that's what was my big game changer, because I was dying the first day climbing out of Yosemite. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to happen. And then I figured out that my pack was wrong, and then got that adjusted. And then after the first 6 days, we unloaded some weight also and got things adjusted. But I think for me, just the pack, I had hiked with that pack probably 3 or 4, 5 times maybe before. And I thought that's good. But until you put your full 8 days of food weight into your pack in the bear can and all the gear that you're going to hike with, it's a complete different feel. And I think that's what my big learning curve and what my big issue was right off the bat, and how I fixed it.
Oh, gotcha. Ouch. You guys are giving me pain. How about you, Jamie?
I would say mine was more mental than physical. I was the slowest hiker out of the three of us generally, so I would trail behind the group. And it made me think I couldn't take a break. And so I had some foot issues, a little plantar fasciitis type feeling, rolled an ankle at one point. Heavy pack when we resupplied at Muir Trail Ranch was really hard on my body that day. And I didn't feel like I could just stop and take a break because I needed to catch up, or I needed to be somewhere, and it was all in my head. And I started actually taking those breaks when I'm like, oh, I need a break. So I'm going to stop, take a break, and then just keep walking. And once I did that, I felt like it freed up a lot of mental chatter that was wasting time, if that makes sense.
It does. It's interesting for me to know you, to think that you were the slow one. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that, but okay.
Well, Jamie she's the fastest one going downhill.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
when we would summit and we'd eat something, take some pictures, and then the downhill part, like Jamie would take off, and then I would be in the back, typically playing catch up.
I was never in the front. I was just one step in front of the other, slow up, slow going down.
Slow and steady.
I would also add, like, taking breaks. We probably should have done better at like planning a no kidding 0 day. But we walked some mileage every day, and the days that we had breaks, it was like a half day of walking 6 miles, and then we were at Vermilion. We probably, with work and all that other stuff, to take a full day up, hey, we're just going to stay at this lake and fish all day. We probably should have done that, in my opinion. You guys weigh in.
I 100% would agree with that. And actually, I'm curious. I don't mind. I'm curious what you guys would think about this, because we didn't really plan our agenda out in advance. We like planned it as we were going. What is your thoughts on planning? Because that 0 day, I think we didn't do it because we didn't have the plan. But at the same time, I feel like you didn't want to over plan. It was tricky.
Our plan was like 10 or 12 miles. It was like, let's just average it out.
Yeah, I feel like we had about a 70% solution probably. And I think it worked out fine, because even our second resupply, we were pretty much right there when we planned that to get there. Yeah, and I think another day, like a day break, because the resorts were a break at the beginning, but we did that 6 mile day and then stopped that one time. But that was still, I think, somewhere on the second half, having a 0 day would have definitely been a good thing.
like midway through a little bit. So, what did you all gain from doing this? And we touched on it a little bit. But Scott, what did you gain?
What did I gain?
What did you gain? You didn't gain
I
weight.
gained a huge appreciation for Pacific Crest Trail hikers and a huge appreciation for trying your pack on full trail weight before you go and getting it, I think, better pre-planning. And I think a huge appreciation for Jamie for planning the trip. And after going through the permitting process and all of that, it was great to have her pit bulling like a dog on a bone, that process. And yeah, I don't think I have any other people that I would do this trip with. So I got a huge appreciation for John as well, for being probably the only person that I would ever do this with. I think,
Nice.
yeah, being out there for 21 days, I don't think anybody else would have, or 22 days, I don't think anybody else would have stuck that out with us. So, yeah.
How about you, John? That was nice.
Yeah, it was nice, dude. I mean, you guys are awesome. 100%. Jamie was the impetus, the driver behind all the planning. I don't pack my suitcase until the day or the night before a trip. So she had all the permits figured out. I'm sure we owe Jamie a huge attaboy and probably some dollars for all of the permits that she bought to make this happen. Whereas if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have gone. My other big thing, and this is at the end, we saw 7 rangers, which I thought was surprising. We didn't see any bears. We saw 7 park rangers. But the last ranger we talked to gave us a little bit of an insight on the people that made the trail.
Oh, yeah.
So my appreciation was this trail wasn't like John Muir set off from A to B and he walked this route. They made this trail, named it after him. But there's a god-awful number of rocks that were dynamited to make these steps that were laid into the side of the mountain, backfilled with gravel that they crushed on site and stair-stepped this thing out. Unbelievable amount of work that I don't think today's youth would be able to do that. Hey, your job today is to crush this rock and make these steps with a shovel and a pickaxe. My son would be like, isn't there a machine that does this? So it was cool to be at Whitney. Top of Whitney to me was like being in an Indiana Jones movie, but somebody labored and made all the steps and cut the trail. And today they still do trail maintenance where they're cutting trees and limbs down and fixing stuff. Or heck, the ranger was throwing rocks out of the trail as we walked down. That was pretty cool. How they were able to do that back in the day with steam and mules. That was neat.
Wow. That's amazing. And Jamie, I know you were carrying 50-pound weighted backpacks for months before this, right?
I was, yes.
So just a quick question, taking what Scott said about his pack, do you think you were totally prepared for that? And then you can answer the question about what you gained, but I'm just saying, did that prepare you, you think?
100%. It's called rucking, and you just carry weight, and you can do it with your actual pack, or you can do it with different types of things. I think it gave me the mental ability, like the ability to know I can more than anything. Because I'll be honest, I stopped training towards the end and I was out of shape. By the time we got to the trail, it was like, I guess I'm training on the trail, but I did it way in advance and it taught me that I can do this. And when my pack weighed 48 pounds at the second resupply, I knew I could do it, even though I wasn't excited all the time about it. So yeah, I think definitely worth it.
Okay. So what did you gain from doing this?
Oh my gosh, so many things. First, a friend, because I didn't know John that well. Like Scott and John go way back, and I just knew John. I actually texted John before I asked Scott if we want to do this trail. I asked John first because I knew he could do it. He was the kind of guy who could mentally do a challenge like this and might actually want to. And I feel like I really got to know you in a way I never would have, because we spent 22 days together. And then we celebrated a little bit on the back end of that. So it was really cool. And I think for the listeners here, if you're considering a journey,
invite John.
Invite John. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, but having the amount of time, condensed time that you do with people you care about, there's layers to an onion of what value you get out of that for your relationship, but also just as a person. So it was really cool to have this experience with the three of these guys. I got a massive appreciation for Scott in the way you're just so good with people. And you always have been. And I saw, even though I'm with you every day, I saw that in multiple ways on this trip that was different than regular day-to-day life. So I would say that just an appreciation for the two of these guys for sure.
Nice.
I'm glad you brought up the
Thank
trail
you.
maintenance. I wouldn't have even thought of that, but that,
I
yeah,
know.
the biggest
that's a
gain.
good.
Yeah. But I would say I also gained a hobby. It's something that I'm going to do forever. I loved it.
I'm hoping not the solo trips. I'm just plugging that in. That's all.
Well, these two
Okay.
told me they're not going to do the PCT with me. So, Mom, you want to do the PCT?
Okay.
I would do a section. I don't think
We'll do
at
sections.
this stage,
Yeah.
I'm too close to the 22 days and 15 blisters to be like, yeah, let's go for 6 months at a time.
Fair enough. I can appreciate that. So you gave a lot of advice as you were speaking. So is there anything else to a newbie or a wannabe that you haven't thrown out there that you'd like to throw out there? And I'll start with you, Scott. I'm just going to go around the room here.
Yeah, go do it. Don't think
Ooh.
that you can't. Just get out there and do it. And don't be scared of bears, the trail, yourself. It is like Jamie said, it's a mental thing and it's a physical thing, but it's probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. So
Awesome.
do it.
Great. How about you, John?
I would say be honest with yourself. If you've got like a knee that bugs you or something, or your back hurts or whatever, I would have a solid like wingman and a plan of don't leave your wingman. But don't press your luck, because I think you don't want to be rescued. Anybody can climb Mount Whitney. The trail up from the portal is one where anybody can do that. The bar to entry is pretty low. But if you've got some problem or you're not ready, then I'd be honest, not press your luck.
That sounds good. How about you, Jamie?
I probably could do a whole episode on this because I started asking people on the beginning of the trail, their biggest lesson was from the trail. So they were coming north, we were going south. And so it was interesting to me to hear like what final advice people would give to us. We were the newbies. And I think the one that keeps sticking in my head, and I think Nikki told us, we met some incredible people. We haven't even talked about that. We met so many cool people, but she said every pass has a purpose, or she read it somewhere. And I think opening yourself up to A, doing the trip, and then B, let what you experience come in, if that makes sense. Embrace those lessons, the good ones and the hard ones. They're so valuable on the back end of the pass. So yeah, for me, embracing every pass has a purpose and trying not to forget even the hard steps matter.
Oh, you got to look up. That's what I forgot to say.
Look up. Yes.
To look up and enjoy the scenery. It's so easy to like look at the ground, at the rocks you're stepping over, and no trip. But you really have to take a moment of just look around. Every pass was like a different vista or portal into another canyon system, drainage, waterway. It was really cool. You just had to look at it. You had to look up.
Nice.
Yep.
I can imagine the photos you have on. I saw Scott's. I really haven't seen Jamie's. And John, I'm sure you have a lot of photos on your phone as well.
Yeah. I was running out of memory on my phone, so my phone was deleting apps en route.
Yeah, completely understand that one. Was there anything else that I didn't touch on? I'm sure we could do this like for hours. It was such an incredible, it was neat to hear it from you all three at the same time, because I felt like I just knew where you were by that little app. What was that app that you used?
The Garmin, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the InReach, Garmin InReach. And so I'd send Mom my messages, and I think you can locate me by the message. It was a satellite phone.
Yeah. And John, did you send messages home as well?
Yeah, so Jamie, bless her heart, paid for the monthly subscription. So we had unlimited 160 character text messages to home base. Scott and I would joke about, can't somebody design a satellite messaging thing that you could FaceTime on, send a picture? Good Lord.
Yeah, that would be so
But
cool.
so yeah, so Eve, my wife, had the app on her phone that she could text on or whatever. And so I would borrow Jamie's and it would send a message. Hey, we're safe at camp, whatever. Here's the plan for tomorrow. So on the flip side, though, to mom here, were you worried at all on this whole expedition?
It's funny you should say that. So I was worried, not falling was one that I think I worried about, and just your typical. I was really glad there were three of you. I do not like solo. Did I say that earlier? I do not like solo hiking. I think that it's pushing me too far, and I'm older now. So it's really unhealthy for your mother. Okay, that's it. I won't say anything more. But I like that little app that you had because you could see, and it sounded like I did ask if there were other people on the trail, and it does sound like it's quite popular. So I knew that there would be, you guys helped somebody on the trail.
Jamie got to test fire her Garmin InReach. Like she pushed the SOS button and then it said like 15 seconds. Are you sure you want to be SOS'd?
Can I tag on that?
Yeah.
Guess who they call?
Mom.
You.
Yeah.
The emergency,
Emergency
contact.
contact.
We're unloading the boat because we just got back from our little adventure. And I get a call from this person saying, Jamie Propst sent an SOS. It's amazing that I didn't fall. And then they say it was for another hiker and it wasn't any of you. So it was, and not that I am wishing anybody to have an accident or anything, but they said everyone was alive. And I was like, you just saved a 911 call. So yeah.
What was the bedside manner of the Garmin person that called you?
Very nice.
Cool.
He was very nice. He knew that he had just called the mother and he was very quick to say everyone was okay and that they were helping an injured hiker that hurt her ankle. He even knew that. So I figured, okay, they're not going to die either. So sounds like it's going to be okay.
And for listeners' context, so a Garmin InReach is definitely a must-have item, I would say, on a trip like this after going through this, not only to be able to reach out to home, but the emergency response was incredible. So we did have to have a helicopter come in to help somebody. So you guys want to share that story?
Go, Jamie.
So we passed a hiker. We came down, was Forrester, wasn't it? It was Mather. And we met a woman at the top who took a picture of us at the top. And she was saying she was waiting for her hiking partner. And so we all hiked down. And John said earlier, I go in the lead typically on the way down and passed a gal who was hunched over her hiking poles clearly in pain. You could see her before you even got to her that she was in a lot of pain. And I asked if she needed anything, any ibuprofen. And Scott's pulling up the video for those of you that are watching on YouTube of where we were. But anyway, so she had gotten some ibuprofen from other hikers and I just stayed with her. And then John and Scott both got there as well. We talked to her for a few more minutes and then we started to hike away. And it was John. She's not going to be able to do this hike. She could hardly walk. I think you turned around and I'll let you take it from there, from your perspective.
Yeah, so she told us that she was fine in that and so as we left, it was like walk a couple paces. And I'm like, I'm gonna see how she's walking. And I turned around and she was essentially crippled. It was her knee. She was hardly making any progress. And it was like, okay, this is dumb. We're at 11,000 feet. Mm-hmm. She had to go over a 12,000 foot pass and then another 2 or 3 miles beyond that to get to the place to camp. And it was 5 p.m. and her friend wasn't there. Jamie and I went back and said, hey, let's play good cop, bad cop. I forget exactly how that played out, but it was like, hey, here's the practical. You're not going to make it. It's going to be cold. Do you have a tent? Do you have water? And of course, she didn't have any of that stuff because her friend was carrying all of the weight. and her friend
Oh.
wasn't there. So it was like, oh my gosh, you don't have a way to make water. You don't have the tent. I think you need to like come back with us and bivouac here and wait for your friend to come back. And then Jamie was like, hey, but I got this device here. You ought to really consider just getting off the mountain. Like your knees are not going to get any better. And we push this button and we'd have help here, Ricky Tick. And the two of us together, she was like, you know what? You're right. Push the button. And away it went. I think an hour and a half, we had a park ranger helicopter land next to us and took her away.
Yep. And it was a really great screening process, I thought, because it did make a weird sound. So you knew even if you hit the SOS by mistake, it was like, so you
Oh.
could stop it if you made a mistake. And then once it went through, I was contacted by Garmin Dispatch first and asked if I really wanted this to happen. Said yes. They asked for the questions about the scenario. I just responded to everything they needed. And then they connected me with a park ranger. And so the park ranger, depending on where they were, how close they were going to come out. And the closest park ranger was 2 days away, which is why they opted for the helicopter. So it was a pretty fast process and they definitely triaged it very well, I thought. So it was a cool learning experience. Unfortunately, at someone else's expense, it was never good to have something like that happen, but good to know that support can potentially be there if you need it. Although the weather was perfect, the location where you were in
was
was
just
really
gonna
great for a
say.
helicopter. Not every spot on the trail was that easy to get to in other conditions. So it was very eye-opening about how something could go pretty wrong pretty fast in the mountains, and it should be respected.
Did her partner know that that this was happening? Did she come back for her?
John went and got her.
So yeah, I had to take my pack off and then I walked back up to the pass and found her. She was coming down. I was like,
Okay.
hey, your friend's not in good shape. And she's okay. And in fact, she's in such bad shape that we hit the SOS button and they're going to come rescue her. And they didn't have their own Garmin. They didn't have a way of doing that. And the hikers, they gave them ibuprofen before us. They didn't have a Garmin either. So it was like fortuitous that Jamie's new toy came in very handy. I think she was at hospital in 20 minutes, 20-minute helicopter ride. I remember asking the pilot, is this going to cost her anything? And his answer was generally no. Like, you're in the national park. You pay your park admission fees and your permit fees, whatever. This is like the service we do. Now, my takeaway was there should be no disincentive to actually use the feature of your Garmin because you're like, oh, this is going to be expensive. Insurance won't cover this. You need it. That's what they do. You came right out, picked her up. All good.
Yep. I think that's important.
I'm really thankful you guys were there for them because that is an amazing.
Yeah.
So not everybody has that app, it sounds from what I'm hearing.
I feel like most do, though. I feel
Oh,
like
A
we
lot of
saw it a
do,
lot.
but
It's
Yeah.
common. You had to see it.
pretty common.
I would 100% recommend that somebody have that, though, if you're
What
going to
was
be
the-
hiking in the backcountry.
What was the cost if you, yeah.
Yep, they're $299 for the actual device. So this is not cheap, but
Mhm.
to me, safety is worth the investment. So $299 for the device, and then you can get a plan that is like monthly for $10 a month, at the lowest tier. Highest is like $65 a month. Or you can get like this one where you can turn it on and off. So like I turn off my subscription when I'm not using it and I turn it on when I have a trip planned. So there's a few different plan options, but to me, the safety option is worth the investment.
Nice. That's good. Good to know. That's a good one to share for sure. Thanks, you guys. Is there anything else to share? I think that was the last bit.
You should ask us, what were you craving at the end of the trail? Like what
I like
what
that
is crossing the finish line? For me, it was French fries. Because there was no French fries at Red's. Of course, there's none at Vermilion and none at Muir Trail Ranch. Sundry list of reasons, but like running into Whitney Portal, I think I ordered a big plate of greasy French fries.
So now I got to ask you, John, wait, do you eat French fries every 21 days normally? Or did that just sound good?
That's like kryptonite for me. I love hot French fries. So I got to watch myself. I think, what did I gain on the trip? I didn't gain any weight. I lost 10 or 15 pounds. I'm trying to keep that off so I can temper my French fry addiction. But that was like, you get back to civilization. You're like, what do you want? Burger, fries, cold beer. Yeah.
Got it.
A bed, a real bed.
A bed is what I missed. Yeah, that first bed was magical.
Bed or shower?
Ooh.
I didn't even miss shower. Did not miss shower.
We want you to miss the shower. No.
Well, nature provided all sorts of baths and showers. You just jump in a lake.
Okay.
Sometimes you're chasing your air mattress in the water. Sometimes you got your clothes on.
How about you, Jamie?
I missed a cold beer. I missed tacos and salad.
Salad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Scott? Just a bed?
The bed, yeah. The bed
okay,
was,
no food?
Yeah. I didn't really miss any food. No. Yeah. Maybe real coffee.
Mom, I want to thank you for flipping the script and being our host today on the podcast and helping us tease out some of these stories and the experience of the JMT. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, I could keep going. It's really interesting listening to you guys. It really is. I don't know that I'd want to do what you did, but it makes me want to do it. So I'm sure that this is going to inspire others.
And that's the purpose, is we like to share these different stories and experiences, because although we did bring a fishing rod, there's so many things to do outside that can create memories and transformation. And we want to expose you guys to those here on the podcast. Before we actually wrap the call, I want to ask one final question, and it's going to go to you as well, Mom. What was your biggest takeaway from this discussion today?
My biggest takeaway. Wow. I've read a couple of those books as well. And it's really interesting to hear the actual journey while you were on the trail. I would be wanting to go with a group that wanted to wake up early and see that sunrise every day. I think the morning is the best time of day. Sorry, but that's just who I am. So it was eye-opening, just everything. I think it's awesome that you guys did that. And the camaraderie between the three of you was fun to see.
Thank you for being here. And before we wrap the call, any final words from John or Scott for listeners? I think we probably will talk about the JMT again. This will not be the last conversation because there's so much to tease out. But any final word for listeners that you'd like to share?
I miss you guys. Mount Shasta. That's my idea for next summer. Let's climb the mountain.
And I love that we're doing this right now live on the podcast. So when you end your trip, plan another trip. And it sounds like we're doing that right now.
Yeah.
That is excellent advice, is what's next.
I
think that's a really good way to end that.
How about you, Scott? Final words?
Yeah. What's next? Plan that next adventure.
Yeah.
Get outside and check out the show notes. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the Fishing for a Reason podcast.